Hello and welcome everybody to Painting with Mandy. This is a bonus live stream that I'm giving today, and we are going to be painting flowers, continue painting these flowers. As many of you may be aware, flowers over time die, and that's why I'm doing these extra streams this week because I wanted to make sure that you could see more of the process than you would normally get to see if I only did this on Mondays. So I have flowers behind me. They are starting to look a little sad. They're drooping. We've lost this one here. So we're going to have to decide whether we're going to make stuff up or maybe replace it with a new flower. The daffodils are starting to get wrinkly and not ideal. So we have a lot of work to do today to take this as far as we can. We're going to be in a place now where we're going to be depending a little bit on the visual memory of what we did before with the flowers, as well as, looking and using our observation with what's available to us. I'm going to mostly be working on finding the skinny edges on the flowers. So, each petal, we tend to paint them just with flatness, but every petal has a really thin edge. And if you can find some of those thin edges, it can create a more finished look in your painting. That's also what causes kind of that crinkly vibe that you get on carnations sometimes. It's really the edge that we're looking for. So we're going to focus on that today. I strongly encourage everybody have an idea of what you're doing before you start. Okay, so you want to have your plan in your head, and sure, sometimes it gets messed up, or the painting tells you to do something else. But you want to have a big idea when you sit down to paint. If you don't have a big idea, you're going to end up like scatterbrained all over your painting, and it can create for a frustrating painting experience. So the plan today is take these flowers to as much of a finish as I can with these flowers, and then make a decision as to whether I'm going to get different flowers and put them in here, or if I'm going to leave this a slightly more impressionistic painting. So let's just hop into it because the flowers are dying even more as I'm speaking right now. Please make sure to say hello in the chat. I love hearing from people. If you have any questions, I am painting today, but I will keep an eye on the chat and try to answer your questions as they roll in here. Okay, so without further ado, I'm just going to grab my palette and we're going to hop into it. This is the same palette I was working on yesterday. So just a quick reminder, we have titanium white, a cad yellow, a slightly warmer cad yellow. Why can't I think of the name of this pigment? Yellow ochre, sorry, cad orange, cad red, viridian green, ultramarine blue, and black, which is mostly gone. Now, if you have used up a color on your palette, replace it. There's something so simple about derailing your entire painting just because you don't have the right pigment, because then I'll start grabbing blue instead, and then all of a sudden my whole painting is going to start tinting blue. And this isn't a blue painting, this is a green painting. So I'm going to replace my black really quick, and then we'll start our painting process today. Okay. All right. So I'm also going to use a smaller brush. We've painted this entire painting with large brushes up until this point. So now we want to transition to a smaller, thinner brush, especially for some of these edges. Okay. I'm going to get my viewing spot here. And I'm really just trying to bring things to a higher finish. I'm going to start with this one because this is the most important flower. This is the star of our show in here, right? So I'm going to start by finding some of the edge work. And there's both tiny little shadows in here as well as some highlighted lines. I'm also going to mix a highlight color for this daffodil. People tend to use just pure white for highlights, but they're rarely ever a pure white out of the tube. And in fact, white isn't even a color. White is a really light red, orange, yellow, green, blue, or purple. If you haven't heard that before, I have a great blog post on our black and white colors. If you type our black and white colors, it'll pop up on the School of Atelier Arts. So if you think it's insane to you that I just said that white is not a color, I encourage you to check that out. It goes into detail. Okay, so my white's a little dirty. I'm gonna scrape off the top layer so I can get to the clean part. And I'm just adding a little bit of yellow to create a nice highlight color here. Okay, so I'm going to be doing two things. I'm going to be creating highlights and then also the shadows that complement them. Um, so I have like a little bit of an edge here. And it's going to be a little bit of a push-pull back and forth here. So I'm going to get my yellow color and push back as well. And, I find when I first start placing highlights, there's a little bit of push-pull going on as we figure out how we want to lay them down. Different flowers have different highlights that behave in different ways. So this daffodil has really skinny highlights, really, really thin. And we're trying to place them in. And then we also have some little shadows kind of complementing the other side of that. So, these small shadows are going to break up the space a little bit and give us the effect here. These flowers are so chromatic that I'm wondering if I can use just a pure yellow highlight on part of this area. So I'm going to draw down just a little bit with the pure yellow and carve into it slightly. And you can see that we're starting to see the edge on here. It's a subtle thing. It's a small thing. I'm going to pull you guys even closer. It's always a battle, right? Because I want you close, but I need a place to stand. But we are getting these nice highlights in here. And I'm actually really liking this pure yellow situation. There's a little bit of a highlight here. And it's really just taking it into a more dimensional place. Um, so the trick with this daffodil cup, if you will, whatever you want to call it, is to find the balance between these tiny little shadow pieces and the highlights. They're kind of like playing a back and forth, being counterpoints to each other. And getting a little more specific in a few of these shadow shapes as well. Just help define a little bit more. There's definitely this great shadow right under here. It's not lines. There's no lines in painting. There's only really skinny shapes. So we're really getting some better definition here. I feel like I can also darken slightly the shadow in here, and that's going to give us a little bit of definition as well. And transition this slightly. Now, I don't wanna do every single highlight. I want to have some clarity here, but I don't wanna overdraw it because these flowers are dead, and unless I replace them, if I overdraw this flower, it's gonna look like it belongs to a different bouquet than the rest of the flowers here. I'm giving a few harder edges where I'm seeing them, especially where this yellow is right on top of the green. It's creating a fair amount of contrast here. And again, a little bit of shadow, a little bit of light. This edge has just a touch of warmth in it. You know, sometimes if you want your flower to stand out more, it's about the shadows underneath the petals than it is the petals themselves. Sometimes people overwork the petals, but the real issue is the shadow underneath. There's also a little bit of texture here where, you know, the shadow is connecting into the light. So giving that a little space to breathe can be helpful. There's definitely a strong edge on this side here, so I want to get that in. It's really going to define this petal. I almost won't need anything else once I get this edge in here. It's a little fat, so let's skinny it up a touch. There. Um, all right, so this leaf is a little more dead, or this petal is a little more dead than it was when I started, and I'm really liking the shape, so I think I'm gonna leave it alone there. And same with this back petal. I might give it a little bit of softness so that it, you know, dissolves into the background a touch more, but I'm not gonna try to define it because it's it's dying. So I either need to replace that flower or leave what my first ideas of it were. This petal definitely needs an edge to it. I'm gonna go with that pure cad yellow again, and just enough to give it a lift from, and I want this to be a touch lighter. And the thing with highlights is you can lay them down, but I like to lay them down and then cut into them, right? So I like to shape them with my dark. It's definitely a little push-pull. All right, so we're really getting some definition here. I think I'm going to have to pull. This one has just a little bit of a turned edge at the end. So we're really not adding too much to get an effect. It's a art of subtlety. It's little bits at a time. I need to do some things over here. I'm going to use a yellow ochre and define this edge on this side. And sometimes just darkening what's next to a highlight will help it pop as well. So by darkening the top of this, oh, that's way too dark. Not what I wanted. You see how that helped define over here? And I feel like I can continue to define slightly. It's got a little brown over here. I want it to still read yellow, even though it's darker. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good. There's a really nice highlight on the edge of this petal here that's going to help define things for us. And I do feel like, this dissolved a little bit too much in here. Maybe just defining this a touch more. Not a super hard edge, but a little bit more of an edge than it had. Okay. I feel like there's a little bit of texture here I'd like to pull out, kind of a stripy feel. Okay, our star is looking pretty good here. I'm gonna turn this far petal edge, just darken it slightly. It'll make it feel like it's turning away from us a little bit. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about that. I still want to keep the big ideas. I want this clarity of the light and the shadows, but just defining it a touch more is always nice. Okay, I'm going to go on to this one because we still have some clarity on this flower. This flower is dead, so we're going to have to go from memory. But these two we can work on. This one, actually, maybe while we're doing yellows, let's do this one next. It's starting to die, so I have to be careful here. I'm working a little bit from memory and a little bit from observation, but this ridge was catching a lot of light there at one point. And again, sometimes what makes something stand out is the shadow side, right? So I'm going to deepen this shadow just slightly on this side to help that ridge stand out. And I'm going to play that shadow across here. Okay, we have another nice kind of definition on the edge of this one. It's darker. Okay, the real key to these are really the, actually, let's get this edge in here. But it's really the cut part of the daffodil that's the main player. Um, and I feel like we need just a little bit on this edge, just a touch, just a hint. Okay, we've really got to deal with this, and it's very similar to this, and the cup is holding out longer than the other part, so it's a great advantage, probably our last day that we can really work on this. So being more specific in the shape can make it more finished, giving it some of those edges we talked about can help make it more finished. But it's just as much about creating the contrast with what's behind the flower as it is creating the flower itself. So just working our way around. Try not to panic with flowers. They're going to move. At some point, you just have to decide where something's going to be, where it's going to live. Um, I'm going to open this up a little bit more to the position it's in now because it's not reading very cleanly. Okay. I have something that I'm starting to like. Um, okay. I'm satisfied with that for now. Just need a little bit more darkness. Like how I said I was satisfied with it, and then I'm like, no, no, I want I want to clarify this a little bit. Just provide a little more connection to the background there. Okay. Now that we have these two daffodils coming up, I have to clarify this just a little bit because it's so far behind. But I want to be careful. I'm just because I'm making it up, right? So I'm using some of my experience painting the other two. We know that there's some texture coming up. I'll provide a little bit of clarity. I don't want to outline the thing. When you start making stuff up, because this flower is pretty far gone, you don't want to change things too much, and you don't want the edges to start getting outliney. Okay. I don't want to mess with that one too much more because we can't really see it anymore. So we'll let that just exist as it is. And now we need to tackle these white flowers. So I'm going to start with the ones that I can still see and then work towards the one that's dead here because we're going to have to make something up. But if we're going to make something up, let's practice on the ones that we can see first. All right, I'm gonna have to move you guys over. I need a touch more space here. Oof, that was a messy highlight here. Sometimes the edge is a shadow. It's not always a highlight on the edge. So for example, let's mix a darker color here. For example, there's some darker edges up through here. We don't want to overdo it. We don't want to underdo it. We want to describe some shapes, but not all the shapes. It's a balancing act and a little bit of push and pull. I want to give a little bit of shape in here. There's lots of different ways to show the shape. Putting a dark behind a light, putting a highlight down. This highlight got super fat here. Especially when you're working with whites, sometimes a little bit of yellow can make it feel brighter, even though it takes the value down slightly. Okay, we're gonna call that one good. I'm gonna jump to this one. This one's feeling lumpy. It's not feeling like a carnation at all. So I'm gonna start this one on the edge work, and let's see if we can get it to be more specific. Already, do you see just getting the shape a little tighter can make such a big difference? Yeah, these carnations are definitely a lot about the edge. Okay, so we've brought these up. Now we're going to just have to make up a little bit here using what we learned from here. So we know we have some of these wavy lines, a few highlights going to catch in here. Maybe just a little bit of some edges. I might have to get another carnation. This is facing straight on. Maybe we can get some hints by looking at the other one from a slightly different angle. Okay, one last flower I really want to do today is this one, because we're going to lose it too. And I don't want to over describe it. It's more in the background than these other ones. And so I don't want it to be more important than the other ones, but I do want to define it just a touch. Give it a touch of a chroma boost as well in some areas. Especially kind of in this, I don't want a color that is nowhere else in the painting. And so I'm in danger with this warmth here. So I'm gonna put a little bit of warmth in these other flowers, just a hint so that this orange color isn't isolated over here. And maybe even put just a dab of it in my carnations just to unify the painting a touch. And we definitely have a few edges to play with here. Both light and dark edges too. It's not just one way. Okay, I don't want this to be too much. Just restate the dark, and there's a touch of a light green in here. A little surprising note. Okay, we're gonna leave it be. I still have these that could use some definition, but maybe letting some of the flowers fade into the background, maybe cleaning them up just a touch. Because this is really my last day before I don't get to see them anymore. So I'm just going to shape them so they don't look generic. I want them to be specific. I'm trying to decide if I want to put the stem in. I mean, we can put it in, and if we hate it, we can take it out. Because it is a little bit brighter. Let's shape it up a little bit. Remember that curves have a point of change in them. So we don't want to genericize curves. And we don't have to draw the whole thing either. We can just imply it slightly. You know, I'm just not quite happy with the composition. There was at one point a little bit of a implied carnation up here. I'm tempted to throw in something that's implying that there's one more up here. I'm just going to do it and see how we feel about it. Yeah, I like that. All right, now I'm just straight up making stuff up. It's not going to be quite so bright because it's way back here. But I need it big because it needs to read as approximately the same size as the other carnations. Maybe it's in front of the stem even. Okay, let's give it some sort of carnation shape. I'm just looking at my other carnations to try to recreate the shape since I'm making it up a touch. We'll just imply one or two areas on it. Oh, I like that much better. It needed just a little bit of life up there. Just let it be pushed back into the background a little bit more. So it's just lightly implied, but not stealing the show. Just, we needed a little bit of a note up there. And I could always go get another carnation, but might do that for, oh, that just ruined it. Do you see how I just ruined the shape because I was making it up? When I first put it in, I was looking at uh, one of my other carnations just from a different angle. Okay, so we're gonna let that one kind of emerge. I might darken it a little bit once it dries. We'll see. This is not the most important thing in the painting, but it did need some life up there. Okay, I'm gonna have to get another carnation to really do this justice here. But we have a placeholder now. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. My eyes are bleeding. I can't see anymore. That's all for today. Thanks for joining. I hope that this was helpful in understanding how to take your flowers up to a next level after that first pass. So thanks for joining today. And the rest of it is pretty straightforward. Next week will be filling in the rest of the table, throwing a few petals in, and any last minute changes, and then we're going to call it good. So throw a few highlights on the vase. All right. Thank you so much for joining today. I will see you next week.